Hello, this is Peter Gregory. This is going to be a video on approaching example 4.3 in the Jacobs book. I've set up my tables here. I have a Microsoft Excel file open, which you're going to want to do, and I'd say almost immediately save that off to wherever you're holding the homeworks for this course, and save it off with your name and the name of the course and your section. And remember, the sections, the 12:20 p.m. section is section 01, and the other section at 2:30 is section 02. So please put that in your file name, save your file name that way, and you'll be uploading that to eClass as a solution. So we haven't really touched the time cost problems in class yet, and I want to be able to have you learn a little bit, get your eyes onto this, and understand it a little bit before we go into it and learn more on Monday in class. But as far as a homework assignment goes, I want to make sure that you're bringing up your skills in the Microsoft Excel area. So this will be an exercise in converting something out of the book into something that actually has active cells and is actively computing some of the sums and differences and solutions that this problem has in store. So we're in the area of the time cost study. What we've done is we've done very simple, started off with the straightforward critical paths. We found slack time. Then we added information about variability, and we ended up being able to see what variability does to the critical paths. And now on the third level of this, we're taking a look at time cost, where we might be able to buy ourselves some time. They call it crashing the network or crashing the system, and seeing what happens if, for instance, a customer comes up and says, we need to have this absolutely in a few weeks less than you normally do it in, or perhaps you took on another contract and you want to be able to get two jobs in the space of one, or have them overlap or bridge each other so that you can actually make more money. You're actually working harder and getting more throughput through your company. So the setup for this example is just a 4-activity network. And the drawing out of the book I'll provide here now. Here's the network drawing. This is the drawing out of the book, exactly out of the book, and I just took a screenshot of it and put it into another sheet here temporarily so we could talk about it a little bit. But you can see where this example is explaining the NT is your normal time, the CT is your crash time. And what they do a network diagram and they annotate it so you can capture a lot of information this way. And they're showing the normal time and the crash time above it, and with each of those rates that you're getting things done in, how long it takes you to get anything done, you also have an associated normal cost with the normal time, and you have a crash cost associated with the crash time. So just taking bubble A here, activity A, it says that the normal time through the activity is 2 weeks, but we can find a way to shorten it to 1 week. And whereas if we're on the rate of getting the process is on the rate of throughput for a 2-week schedule, we're at $6 a week. We're working at $6 a week here. That's the normal rate of how much it costs to come through. Whereas when we go into burst mode, when we're speeding things up and we're in crash mode, and we go to crash time and we need to have the time from 2 weeks to 1 week, that it costs us more. It costs us $10 per week at that rate. So that's what those two numbers reflect, the dollar values here. And then they put in the numbers for the rest of the network. The narrative of the example tells us what we need to put in here. It actually gives us these numbers. So the 4 things that we end up doing when we have the crash time is we first do this. We prepare this crash time diagram. That's the first step. And then up here we see that the step 2 is to determine the cost per unit time of speeding up the process. The third item is to compute the critical path, and this is with the nominal time. So you start out with the nominal times. You'll notice that over here that the nominal time is normally for activity A is 2 weeks, and you can see that's what's used here is A of 2 weeks. Starts at 0, finishes at 2. Our network diagram shows a split. It goes off to one processor, activity B, and one off to C. They both start at week 2. And each of those numbers in here for the elapsed time is just the nominal times for each of those processes. That's all it is. We can take those numbers and go over the table given in the problem here. This again is just a screenshot. It's the image from the book, and we have to do some computations here. So this is the table we need to convert into a live, active Microsoft Excel file. Because here we just have text. It's explaining how to set up or set the table here to finish off the problem. And we're going to have to compute the crash cost minus the normal cost. And in text, they're actually showing this in the table. And that's what you're going to do, is you're going to reproduce the text here, but you're going to also add in the incremental numbers because they're showing stepwise how to step through the process here. But we're going to add a line under each one of these activities where the active numbers are there, and you're going to use equations or functions to do the calculations that you see in the last two columns here. So let's go over. I want to give you a hand in getting this started. We'll go over, and we have a fresh sheet here, so we're starting with a clean sheet. One of the first things to do when you're going to convert something like this, we're going to need live data. We're going to need, in our case here, we're going to want actual numerical data, but also textual representations of them that we leave in there as notes. So anywhere there's text, it's helping us read through the process and see where each of the steps takes place. So the first thing that I would do is I would put in the given information in a tabular form, and we have four activities, A and B and C and D. So you're going to put those in, and then there are associated numbers with each of these, or associated parameters for each of these processes or activities. And the first one is going to be the normal time versus the crash time. And you're going to have normal cost per day or per unit of time versus crash costs per unit of time. It's like how many dollars per day or how many dollars per week or how many dollars per month it costs under both conditions of normal process time and crash time. The numbers given to us here, I'll try to do this quickly, is 2, 1, 6, 10 for process A. Process B, we have 5, and I'm using the tab function to move to the right. 2, tab, 9, 18, 4 and 3, and 6 and 8, and 3. I'm using tab again to move to the right. Okay, so now we're going to take a look. We put in the raw numbers. This is the raw data we're going to have to use. There might be a little bit more here. There's another number here, and we talk about crashing the system. Crashing the system means shortening the time up, trying to race things through. But there can also be a situation where you run past the end of your process and you're late. So the problem does talk about the fact that in the area after the process normally finishes, we start having an issue where we're paying higher indirect costs. So these are the direct costs. The given numbers are direct costs that happen during the process, and there is also indirect cost. And I'll show something here, I guess, is that I think I'm going to move this cell, and to do that you do a Control X, and I want to move that back over here. And Control X is going to delete it out of that cell, but it also copies it to the clipboard. So now that is in the clipboard, and if I move over to the left one and I do a Control V, which inserts whatever on the clipboard, it both removed it from where it was and then inserted it where I wanted it to go. So I just want some of these things format-wise to line up a little bit better. I'm going to quickly show something here I highly recommend I'd like to see, and that is one way to format tables so your eyes can pick up what needs to be seen the easiest is selecting cells, I just hold down the left mouse button and move my cursor to the right, and I'm selecting groups of cells at a time. And now I don't have my fingers on any of those buttons, but what I can do is I can add more cells to my selection by holding the control key down. Of course, this is all Windows, and selecting the top row here. So I selected some interesting columns and the rows by using the select function in Excel, and also using this control function where it adds whatever else you're selecting to the already selected areas. So when I've selected all that, I'll show you something that goes on with tables quite often is I'd like to color those a little bit differently. So there's a flood fill function here if you're on the home tab. As long as you're on the home tab, you're fine. And you'll find this flood fill. There's a bucket there like you're going to pour color all over it. So I normally go in and grab a pretty dark blue, and you can see that once I select that, you can barely see. In fact, you can not really see the letters underneath there. So I'm going to reselect my area again because I deselected it. So I just reselected it all. I'm going to change the font to white, and I usually go to bold on that. So now when we look at the table, our eyes can pick out things maybe a little bit easier. We can see the data versus the headings. So what else should we do here? Maybe what I'll do is on the columns in here, I'll also center justify. So I come up and I center justify. That looks a lot better. So that's how it looked. If I want to undo the last command, I use Control Z, and that's where we started. And if I want to redo that, I just hit Control Y. So you have Control Z, Control Y, go forward and backwards in the redo list. So I just wanted to show you I wanted to give you a visual as to what happens there when you reformat it. Maybe you learned that Control X and the Control Y tool out of Microsoft Excel there. The indirect costs were just, I think, applied to all of the processes. See, that's the overhead, so it's not particular to any process. And for in-process time, if you're within the nominal time, we will call this indirect cost for nominal time will be $10 per day. And we will put it in there as a number, okay? Speak a little bit about format. I want to show a little bit about format here. So these cells have text in them. Direct costs given, these are text, obviously we're writing in there. Well, we can specify whether a cell is text or whether it is some other number through this ribbon up here in the Microsoft parlance. Is up in the ribbon here, we go to where the number is, and we can re-specify the format. And right now it's on general, which generally works. It usually works. It self-identifies. Usually in this mode, Microsoft Excel understands whether it's text, if there's text in there, or it treats it as a number if it's number. But sometimes we want to override that because it gets confused and it's trying to interpret it as a wrong type of information. So we'll show something here. What we're showing, we're going to do a reformat on something here where this is just simple numbers. These are days. The units on these numbers are days. But in here, when we're talking about under indirect costs, so there are some things that we can do with the table that we just put in there to make things more clear. And one of them is that these two columns are shown as time. These are in days. For our problem, we're talking about days here. 2 days for the nominal time for activity A is 2 days. But in costs, we're talking about currency. So one of the things about the standard formatting of these cells, they normally start out up here, you can see, as general, and it interprets whether it's text or numerical or even date or other formats. It can tell by how you enter that in there. What we want to do is change that over to currency. So we're going to look at putting, say, a $sign in front of that. When we look at the table, it'll immediately be obvious that we're dealing with a currency there. So we come up to the format, the number format area of the ribbon at the top of the screen here for Excel. And when we click the expansion button, this little arrow here, we have a number of different formats to use. We can use a general number. There's the currency. There's certain reasons for doing accounting. There's a date and a time and a percentage, etc. But we were after currency. So we'll come back to currency. And one of the things that we see here is they give you the example at the top here of what it's going to look like when we change it. And we're using round numbers. So I think so far we're okay by removing the decimal places and changing that to 0. And we'll leave in the symbol, the dollar symbol. The point here was to put the dollar symbols in the table, so when we look at it, we know that there's a different unit there. That's the dollars involved with changing, speeding up any of these processes. So all I have to do is click OK, and you can see that the format changed. So these columns, these numbers are in currency in dollars, and these are in time. We won't add anything in there as far as format goes. They're just there. So what we can do is add in our indirect costs too, and nominally per day of operation, our overhead costs in normal process time are $10. So what we might put in there is that's for our normal time. I'm going to move something around here. I want to reformat this. I'm going to grab this box here, and I'm going to move it by Control-Xing and deleting it out of there and moving it here with a Control-V, and that did what we needed to. So then I'm going to grab this cell here and move that down. I'm going to set this up a certain way. I think this will look better. And this would be crash. Okay, so after we go past, this will be late. So when we go past the deadline, our indirect costs go up for the sake of this problem. It says there, we're allocated the right amount per day, or an amount per day for indirect costs, and then they go up if we go past our deadline. And the late they describe as being $5 more per day, so that would be 15. So that would be 15, and let's go in and change that over to currency, just so when we look at it, it's obvious. There we go. Okay, and we'll call the delta is the difference is going to be $5 a day difference. Okay. We'll go back in there. We'll go back in there and we'll change that to the currency. There we go. So we're looking at currency numbers there. Very good. Okay, so here comes now that we have these numbers, we can do such things as coming over here and adding them together. These are live numbers, and I'm saying this because when we do the other table, we're going to add text in the other table to leave a trail of where we've been. We were able to look at the table and see in text what's going on in the table. We haven't gotten there yet. We're really just working with raw numbers, and this is the reason. This is a little bit extra. You won't see this in the book, but this is how you have to set up for Excel if you want to make computations. So these are live numbers, and we can do such things as, say, subtract them. So in order to do that, when you select the box and you're going to put a function in there, when you select a cell, start with the equal sign. As soon as the equal sign pops up, Excel knows that you're going to be computing something in that cell. So what we're going to do is just subtract one number from another. So I want to subtract, for instance, the normal time for process A or activity A, and I click the cell and it appears in the equation. So we're in the process of inserting an equation, and Excel is intelligent enough to let us go pick cells and perform operations. I just typed the minus sign. That's all that was, to add the minus sign. And the number that we want to subtract is 1, and all you have to do is hit enter and you get the solution there. When you click the cell, you'll see the equation or function up here in the edit bar up at the top of Excel. Okay. Just to be a little bit more clear, we can do certain things like now let's multiply by dollars per day, and this is just for example, but we can now edit our equation, and probably we would want to put parens around this so we don't make mistakes with the orders of operations here. And let's say we want to multiply by $6 a day, so we select that number. The normal cost is $6 a day, and I am going to multiply, so I use the star. That's the multiply in Excel. So I'm multiplying E4 in dollars per day times some number of days. And when I hit enter, we're going to see that it's now multiplying by 6 by 1, and that's where we get our 6. So we're now doing some functions inside the cells, and I can delete that because that was just for example. I just delete that. Okay. So now when we get into the table, which I've pulled off the online version here. This is the image of that table that's in the book. There's some equations that are going to be set up. They've gone very explicitly through the process. They've lined up their table to show all the intermediate steps here. Okay, so you might go across the top here, and you're going to see crash cost minus normal cost, and they punched in the numbers. But this is text, and we want to have live numbers in there. And this is your assignment: is to take this, and you will put text into your Microsoft Excel file, just like this is, that shows the incremental steps toward getting the solution. But we're also going to use live numbers as well so that we can actually calculate. So the difference between having text and having live numbers is this. Let's put in the top row here. Okay, so we're going to put in the headings on the columns. Here comes the headings. Okay, so we're going to go over to the worksheet that we're working on, and while we're here, I'm going to rename it. So I come down to the bottom and I double click the current name, and I'm going to put in there example 4.3. Okay, and then hit enter, and now you've named that sheet. That can be helpful later on, but now it's clear as to what the sheet is about. So we're going to set up the table that comes out of that chapter. First thing we're going to put in there is activity. That was the first heading. Then we're going to put in something called the crash cost. I'm going to put a space, a minus sign, and a NC for normal cost, and that just formats a little better on the eyes. You have a little space in there that you can see that. The next heading was normal time, space, minus, crash time. But then we get to, let me fix that, and then we get to a heading that's a little bit interesting. Now we see something kind of a format of an equation here, and I'll show you a couple ways of maybe doing that, and the one that probably I'd recommend. Okay, so we're going to go back to our sheet, and if you remember, we're trying to do the costs over the times. Difference in costs over the difference in times. That's the equation that comes right out of the book. So we go back to where we're working. And I'm going to use two lines here. We're going to kind of use what Excel gives us. I'm going to use the crash cost minus the normal cost. And remember, that just comes from this cell over here. Put some spaces in there just so it's visually easier on the eyes. And that was, the equation is that over NT minus crash time, normal time minus crash time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this cell, and we're going to go up to where we do some formatting on the borders, and you come up to this drop down button in font. For some reason they stuck it under font. Okay, and what we're going to do is do the drop down box, and it gives you all these selections. And what we're going to do is, there is the first selection here is just a simple, very thin line bottom border, and when I click that in there, we just put a border underneath the cell, and it goes from one edge of the cell to the other, and that's one way of doing it. When we take a look at that, that looks like an equation. However, there's another way to do that, might be a little bit better. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to get rid of the underline. So we're going to use no borders. We returned it to no borders. There's no border on that, below it. And I actually can select the text and select underline, and that could be our divide sign there. And I kind of like that because later on it gives us some protection on either side of the cell in case we use lines for borders later on. It wouldn't get lost. So I kind of like doing this way. And one of the things we'll do with all the headings, but I'll do it now for this one, is center that up. I'd like to center that so now that line is away from the edge of the cells and it's clear what's going on there. So let's see, what was the next couple of headings that we have to do there? Now we have some big text coming up. Cost per day to expedite, maximum number of days, activity may be shortened. Okay, so they used very long titles in there, and that works pretty well. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over to our work area and put in cost per day, and I'm going to use the Alt-Enter to expedite. You can see the formatting is getting a little bit interesting there. Okay. And the next column heading was maximum number of days activity may be shortened. So that's a bit of a mouthful. Maximum number of days activity can be shortened. And I'm going to put my cursor in here and do an Alt-Enter, and that drops it down. We're going to use multiple lines here, and I'm going to delete the space, that extra space that we had, and there we go. So, all right. Continuing here, I see some things that I might want to change around a little bit. We've gotten off to a different line here. I'm going to fix something very quickly here. So we're going to take these two cells. I think this just pays to see how sometimes things are done here. And I'm going to select these two cells and move them. And so I use Control X, and I'm going to drop them down in here, so we're all on the same line. And you can see we sort of have something hanging up here, but there's a way to deal with this. Remember, this was our equation, so it offers a little bit of a challenge. So I'm going to take the text. I just selected all the text there and delete it. So I deleted that. Now that cell is empty, and I'm going to come back down here, and I'm going to do something here where I'm going to insert it with a Control V, and now we have crash cost minus normal cost. That should be still underlined. And what we can do right now is just do the Alt-Enter, and it drops the next part of that down. So let's take a look at what we've got here. So I think what we now have to do is re-underline it. Okay, so now we have the equation in one box. Okay, so everything is in the same row here, and that's working out pretty well. Okay. So we have our headings here across the table, just as the book does. We put our headings in here, and now we're going to come back, and we're going to put in under activity. I'm going to give ourselves just a one row clearance underneath the headings here. We might come back and get rid of that later on if it looks better without it. But we're going to put in A here, skip a row B, put in C, put in D. Okay, so we have our activities in there. The original table has text in it. So go back to the table. What we're reading here is text. It's not numerics that can actually be computed. We have to add them in separately. So what we're going to do is come back to our worksheet that's going to start computing these things, but we're going to use the text that we need there. And if you look, we have the first column here. We're going to put the text in first. So we'll have to maybe flip back and forth here. So I'm going to come back and type in the text, $10 minus $6, 18 minus 9, etc. So I'm typing this in as text, 10 space minus 6, so that's $10 minus 6. That's the text part of it. What I'm going to make sure is that this cell, this text is going to be treated as text, and come in here and click the selection to treat that as text. Okay, so we have that. So under B, I believe it was $19 minus 8. Again, I'm typing in text, not numeric information. Take a look at C. Eight by 6, 9 by 5. So we have our text in there. I think we have it formatted fairly uniformly. And we want to make sure all these are text, so we're going to go back and select them. And now I'm using the control button on Windows and using the mouse to select these. That's how you get multiple selections without having them all in a row. If you shift and select, you get everything along the row. So if I click that, come down to D, and I hold down Shift and click, I get everything between also. If I use the control, I just get the boxes I actually clicked. See the difference there? Okay. All right. So there we Excuse me. These numbers come from this table up here. This table up here has actual numeric data. So below these boxes, what we can do is put the actual equation in there. So we're going to do the 10 minus 6 here. So what we're going to do is select that box, and we want a function in there. We hit equal. We can come up here, and we can use from the column for A, or rather the row for A, we're going to use its crash cost. I select where the crash cost for A is. I type minus for subtraction, and I click the normal cost, and I hit enter, and we actually get the result. Okay? So that's all I'm going to do as I go down the rest of these here. So now I've computed these down here. One of the things we see what we might want to do is I want to grab these cells and center them. I just want to set them up as formatted center. So we just center those. We're going to probably want to find a way to differentiate these numbers below there so our eyes can follow that a little bit more easily. Okay. And then we're going to go through the rest of the table, and we're going to do the normal time minus the crash time. And in text, what we're going to do is we're going to select the boxes that have text, that will have text in them, and we're going to format them for that. Otherwise, we're going to get a funny computation. So now it doesn't treat these as numbers, it treats these as simply text. It's not trying to perform an operation on them. So the normal time for A would be so now we have text in there. It's not trying to compute these, it's not trying to interpret them. What we can actually do down here is use the cells that have the information in there. So you can see where I'm going there. And finally, so we'll just double check to make sure our numbers look good. 3 minus 1 is 2. 4 minus 3 is 1. That looks good. 5 minus 2 here is equal to 3, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So we're computing what's right above here, but whereas this is text, we're picking our numbers up from the real table up here. So please go through and do these types of computations that will fill out the rest of the table. So you're going to have it as that is presented in the book with text here, as well as computationally it's actually performed. And one other thing I would suggest here is, like we did as we did in the other one, is we're going to format this a little bit so it's easier on our eyes. So I'm going to select these cells right here on the left, which is like our key for the head of the rows, and then holding down the control button I can also select the ones across the top. I've added that to the selection. And what we're going to do is I can come right up. This color's already selected. I'm going to dump the color in there. And then now these boxes are still, these cells are still selected. So I can just click on A, which the A up here is the color of the text, and it's still selected as white. So I can hit white. And then I usually, when I do this reverse like this, light on dark, I usually make it bold so it comes up better. It looks better that way. So that's what I'm looking for you to do is complete the rest of the table with the computations, just like I started here, and make sure that it matches the table in the book. And we'll see you on Monday.